In September 2021, a Royal Navy survey ship stopped in the middle of the Barents Sea and switched off her engines. Her name was HMS Echo. Her commanding officer walked to the rail and cast a wreath into the water. A Russian cruiser was sailing nearby. She signaled across to the British ship, a message about a generation who served, in her words, with great honor and bravery, and about a common enemy. To all those who sacrificed themselves, she said, the memory of them will forever live in our hearts. Two navies that spend most of their time watching each other had stopped, in the same stretch of freezing water, to remember the same men. 245 meters below them lay a British cruiser, and inside her, when she went down, were 5.5 tons of gold. This is the story of what that gold cost, and of the strangest decision any government ever made about a grave. To understand why the gold was there, you have to understand what the Arctic convoys were. Between 1941 and 1945, British and Allied ships carried supplies to the Soviet Union along the top of the world, through the Barents Sea, past occupied Norway, within reach of German airfields and U-boat patrols the entire way. They delivered 4 million tons of material: aircraft, tanks, trucks, fuel, medicine, raw metal. About a quarter of everything the Allies sent the Soviet Union across the whole war went by this single, brutal route. The Soviet Union paid for some of it, in gold, In late April 1942, HMS Edinburgh, a town-class light cruiser, left the Soviet port of Murmansk carrying that payment in her bomb room, and took up station with a homebound convoy designated QP-11. On the 30th of April, a German submarine put a torpedo into her. The damage was catastrophic. It blew apart her stern. Her steering was gone. A cruiser is a machine built to move at 30 knots and shoot. A cruiser that cannot steer in the Barents Sea in 1942 is a target being held still. For 2 more days she was fought over. Destroyers tried to tow her. German destroyers came for her. And on the 2nd of May, the Royal Navy made the decision the Royal Navy hates most. Rather than let her be captured or leave her drifting, a British destroyer, HMS Foresight, was ordered to fire a torpedo into a British cruiser. She sank with the gold still in her. It is worth being precise about where she sank, because it explains everything that comes afterwards. 72 degrees north. The Royal Navy's own description of those waters is clinical. Anyone who ends up in the sea there will lose the feeling in their fingers and toes inside 5 minutes. They will be unconscious inside 30. They will probably be dead within the hour. That is in summer. Men died with HMS Edinburgh. The exact number is recorded by the Commonwealth War Graves Commission, which is the authority on it. This film does not quote figures it cannot open the source for, so we are not going to give you one. What we can give you is the scale of the thing they were part of. Across the Arctic convoys, 16 Royal Navy warships were lost and 1,944 Royal Navy personnel were killed. 85 of the 1,400 merchant ships were sunk. 800 merchant sailors died. That was the price of the 4 million tons. The moment HMS Edinburgh settled on the seabed, she stopped being a warship and became something else. A grave, with 5.5 tons of gold inside it. Gold does not stay forgotten. In the files of the British National Archives, there is a folder from 1955. Its description is short and rather flat. A proposed salvage of the cargo of gold carried by HMS Edinburgh, sunk in 1942 by enemy action after leaving the Soviet Union. 1955, 13 years after she went down. 26 years before anybody actually reached her. Think about what that folder means. Within a decade of the war ending, while the men who survived that convoy were still in their 30s, there were already people writing to the British government asking for permission to go down and get it. And they kept asking, The archive holds file after file: the Ministry of Transport, the Ministry of Defence, the Foreign Office, running from the 1950s into the 1980s. One Ministry of Defence file is catalogued under a heading that tells you exactly how the department thought about it. Commercial salvage, His Majesty's ships deemed to be war graves, HMS Edinburgh, recovery of gold. Those two ideas sit in the same line of a filing card. War grave, recovery of gold. For 30 years, the answer was no. But every year, the technology got better. And every year, the gold, priced in a world that had left the wartime gold price far behind, got more valuable. And a grave that is worth enough money stops being only a grave. It becomes a location. In 1981, the British government said yes. A salvage consortium was permitted to go down to HMS Edinburgh and take the gold out. Now, the obvious assumption is that somebody was bought off, or that a treasury short of money in 1981 simply wanted the revenue. That is not what the government said. 4 years later, a minister stood up in the House of Commons and explained the reasoning on the record. And the reasoning is genuinely strange. Authority to dive, he said, was given under government supervision, on the grounds that the gold bullion on board was sufficiently valuable to tempt other salvors who might not respect its status as a war grave. Read that again. The government did not permit the salvage despite the ship being a war grave. It permitted the salvage because it was a war grave. The logic runs like this. The gold is worth a fortune. The wreck sits in international waters where Britain can assert almost no control. Sooner or later, somebody is going to go down there, and if it is somebody Britain has not authorized, nobody will be standing over them while they cut into a ship full of dead men. So, better a supervised operation conducted under British eyes by people bound by conditions than an unsupervised one conducted by whoever gets there first with a boat and a cutting torch. The gold was not the prize, the gold was the problem. And the only way the government could think of to stop the gold endangering the grave was to remove the gold from the grave. Not everybody accepted that argument. The minister was candid about it. The operation, he said, provoked adverse comment, particularly from the Survivors Association. These were the men who had been on her, who had been fought over for 2 days in the Barents Sea, who had watched a British destroyer torpedo their own ship, and who now had to read that a commercial consortium was going to be lowered down to her with the government's blessing. Whatever the logic said, something had been done to their ship that they had not asked for. And then, 2 years later, the argument was settled in the worst possible way. There is another British wreck, HMS Hampshire, sunk by a mine off the Orkney Islands in 1916 with heavy loss of life, including Lord Kitchener himself. A consortium had been allowed to film the outside of that wreck in 1977 and again in 1979 on strict conditions. Film the exterior only, do not land on her, do not go inside, do not interfere. In 1983, they applied again, this time in a climate that had changed completely after the Falklands. Ministers refused. They came anyway. In a well-publicized operation, they raised around 30 small items from HMS Hampshire, some of them personal effects. They also took her ship's wheel and her enormous phosphor bronze propeller. The Ministry of Defence had said no and discovered it could do nothing whatsoever about it. That was the moment the policy broke. As the minister put it, HMS Hampshire was the operation that really brought matters to a head and convinced them of the need for legislation. Britain had a war graves policy. It simply had no law behind it. So they wrote one. In January 1986, the Protection of Military Remains Bill came before the House of Commons. It made it an offence to interfere with the wreckage of military aircraft and vessels without authority, and it applied to British warships anywhere in the world, not merely in British waters. The bill did not require anyone to prove that a wreck contained human remains. That was deliberate. Proving it would have meant digging for the evidence, and digging for the evidence was the thing they were trying to stop. It is worth noticing what that law protects: not a quantity, not a body count. There is no threshold in it, no minimum number of dead that turns a wreck into a grave. A protected place is protected because of what it is, not because of how many. Which brings us back to a Royal Navy survey ship, stopped in the Barents Sea in September 2021. Echo was there to run a sonar survey, the first anyone had made of that wreck in 40 years. Since 1981, nobody had been back. She found the ship, 245 meters down, clearly identifiable, and beyond the reach of the fine detail. Then her crew stopped work and put a wreath in the water. The gold has been gone for 40 years. The grave